It does take a minute for everybody to start, but the recording has begun. And again, for those who are just joining, it takes a minute for all of the people to get moved in from the waiting room. So we're just giving it a minute on there. And in the meantime, I'll just introduce myself, Dominic Zerlo with the New Mexico Department of Health. We are here to help, the Department of Health staff are here to help facilitate this from an administrative standpoint. And then the chair is Chris Peskuski, who is here. And Chris, I'll turn it on over to you.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you all know me by now. I'm Chris Peskuski. I'm the chair of this board, and I'm on the advisory board. And I'm a veteran, and I'm holding that role in this. I'm the veteran representation on the advisory board. And I'm also an ambassador for the Heroic Hearts Project, and I've got a great relationship with the medicine I've been working with for about 3 years now. In a therapeutic capacity, and before that, I used it in a recreational capacity. And so I like to start these meetings off with just a short 30 seconds of silence to kind of acknowledge all the chaos in the world and all the suffering going on in our communities, throughout our state, throughout our country, and throughout the world. And the purpose of this is really just to hold a little bit of space and create a small container of calm in a world full of chaos. So just 30 seconds. All right, thank you all. Next up, I would like to have everybody go ahead and introduce themselves. I want to remind everybody that we passed the bylaws last time, and if you do not introduce yourselves and we end up voting on a proposal or something like that today, you will not be able to do that. So please make sure to introduce yourselves, and if you want to have a say in how this all shakes out.
Just to let everyone know, if they wish to speak, please raise your hand, as I don't believe. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, and I'll meet you. First, we have Eric Barker. I will allow your mic. Please, Eric, when ready, unmute yourself and begin.
Hello, my name is Eric Baca, and I'm joining the committee for the second time, I think it is. And I just wanted to introduce myself and tell everyone hi.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Pause for 1 second. I forgot to ask for one other thing. Please, while you're introducing yourself, let us know if you're from New Mexico and what affiliations you have. So.
Okay, yeah, I'm from New Mexico, and I don't have any affiliations with any companies or mushrooms or anything like that. So,
thank you very much, Eric. Next, we have Esteban. I have allowed your mic. Please unmute and speak when ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chris, thank you again for hosting today. My name is Esteban Hernandez. I am a New Mexico resident, owner of New Mexico Fungi, a currently gourmet mushroom farm based out of Albuquerque, and I am also the president of the New Mexico Mycological Society. Or excuse me, not Mycological Society, Mycology Guild.
Thank you very much for that, Esteban. 1 second. Okay, next we have Manuel. I have allowed your mic. Please unmute when ready and begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manny Griego, and I am from Albuquerque, born and raised here in Albuquerque. And I have no real affiliations with any groups right now. I'm just looking to get on this committee, and it's something I'm very interested in and have been a part of for a while. So looking to see where this goes and help in any way I can. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Alan Thomas. Alan, I have allowed your mic. Please unmute and begin when ready. If you are experiencing any trouble, do drop a line in the chat. And typically what we have noticed that if someone drops out of the chat and comes back in, that typically remediates any issues. So yeah, let us know. So I will move on to the next individual. We have John there. So I'm just going to allow Mike. John, please begin when ready.
Hi, my name is John. I'm a home mycologist. I've done some work with NM fungi and Four Corners fungi. I'm just here to help any way I can, and I'm here from New Mexico, and this is a second committee meeting.
Thank you very much for that, John. And just the comment by Alan there, yeah, if you can introduce yourself on the chat, and also again, if you feel like it may benefit, maybe dropping off from the chat and joining back in, that can and often has solved the issue. Next, we have Brett. Brett, I have allowed your mic. Please unmute yourself and begin when ready.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see you all again. My name is Brett Phelps. I am an attorney based in Las Vegas, New Mexico. I live in Mora, New Mexico. Have no other affiliations other than, wanting to support the program as much as I can. I've been going to a bunch of the committee meetings. Became especially interested in this one after the last full board meeting, when it became clear that this particular committee has got a lot on their plate in a very short period of time. So this is, rules, regulations, laws is what I do. So wanted to just offer my help for that in any way I can, and happy to be here.
Thank you very much for that. Next, we have Gregory Evans. I have allowed your mic. Please begin when ready.
Greetings once again, everybody. Thank you, Chris, for holding space. My name is Gregory Evans. I'm here as an independent researcher and mycologist. I am available to produce any form of research, writing, contributions that can promote the successful function of this group, which I see as currently writing the recommendation in T-minus, this is like yesterday. I'm currently working on a unified glossary of terms that will be submitted for community and committee review. That's all.
Thank you very much for that. And before I get to Scott, we just have two. Alan Thomas. Hi, my name is Alan Thomas. I have no business affiliations. I am interested in the committee and what is going on. Next, we have Tay Davis. My name is Tay Davis. I'm a New Mexico resident. I do not have any affiliations. I just want to support by serving on the committee. So thank you for sharing. Next, we have Scott. I have allowed your mic. Please unmute yourself and begin when ready.
Hello, my name is Scott Folkman. I am a chemistry professor at New Mexico State University. I also am starting an analysis lab primarily targeted at state-regulated cannabis for potency and residual pesticides. I am also interested in doing the potency analysis of psilocybin mushrooms when things come online. So our private lab that we are creating, we also want to be able to do and contribute in that way to the potency and consistency testing of the mushrooms that are cultivated in the state.
Thank you very much for sharing. Next, we have James. James, I have enabled your mic. Please unmute and begin when ready.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. James Ferreira. I am a software developer by nature. I'm building the app. Actually, we're releasing the app in 2 weeks that will help manage the entire backbone of this industry. So everything from cultivating spores to long-term patient care and outcome tracking. Um, yeah, so happy to be here, and I want to make sure I get everything you all come up with into this app so that it perfectly matches what we're trying to do here from a technology standpoint.
Fantastic. Incredible. Thank you very much for sharing. And finally, in the chat, we have Eric Barlow. I am unable to talk over voice. I'm Eric Barlow. I'm from Idaho, but I've been cultivating cannabis and mushrooms since I moved away in 2019. And Greg Evans makes another comment there at the bottom. I forgot to clarify. I'm a New Mexico resident since 2019. No affiliations. So with that, we have another hand up there, and that's Ben Edwards. Ben, I have enabled your mic. Please begin when ready. Just unmute and yeah.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ben Edwards. I've lived in New Mexico most of my life for about 50 years, and I'm an amateur mycologist and have worked in ceremonies for about 30 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben, for that. And next in the chat, we have James Hasobe. Greetings, everyone. I'm James here. I'm a biomedical research analyst affiliate with the Department of Health in Arizona. I'm wanting to learn more, and it's great to be here. So thank you for sharing that, James. And with that said, that is all the comments from all members. Chris, I turn back to you.
Thank you very much. Next, can somebody put up the agenda and perhaps post it to the chat as well? Oh, excellent. All right, so just a few things we want to talk about today. Next up is how to do our documentation. If you want to send something to the advisory board, please send it to the Department of Health if it's specifically for this committee. Make sure you put that in the subject line, and that way we can be transparent with our documents and everything we are going to try to accomplish in all the proposals we're going to work through here in committee. And so if you send those proposals, they can become part of the record of the last meeting, and then people can review them, and we can go through them and kind of take stuff and bring it into these discussions as we see fit. But I just want to do this the correct way, so we are transparent about this process, and we are being fair for everybody. So that's the appropriate way to send documentation and make it part of the public record. Is that correct, Dominic?
Yes, it is. And I do have that on the slide that's on the screen right now with that information. And I'll be putting that in the chat here in just a moment.
Excellent. After this, we're going to hear from Tori Armbrust. I hope I said your name right, and learn about and a little bit about lessons learned. I was hoping to have a representative from Colorado as well to see some of their lessons learned in the cultivation space, but I might be able to get somebody on it next week. And then DOH has provided us an outline that they are recommending we work from, and we'll go over that. I've been kind of digging into the mushroom good agricultural practices. So I wanted to talk about that briefly. We will have a little bit of time for proposals, and then talk about what we're going to do at our next meeting, and have some time for discussion, hopefully. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tori if you're ready to talk about lessons learned in what you've learned during your working in this space. Can we unmute Tori?
Yeah, so actually, Tori, I'm elevating you to a presenter. So give me just a moment to get that done. And you should be a presenter now, Tori, and you should be able to go ahead and speak. And if you have any slides, you can present those as well.
Tori is not ready.
Dominic, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Tori, I just want to say your mic is live, but we're not hearing anything.
Okay, maybe we can come back to Tori. Maybe she's not quite ready yet. Or if you're having trouble, please let us know in the chat, Tori. Is there anybody here from Colorado who would like to share some lessons learned?
If anyone wishes to speak, please raise your hand so I can enable your microphone. If you are, wondering about that. Tori's in the chat just specifying that she's unmuted, but you all can't seem to hear me. I'm sorry. It may be just try and give this one a go. If you drop off the chat and then maybe join back in, it may just fix that. It seems to have worked a few times in the past for other participants in the not too distant past. So try that out and see what happens, and we will continue on. And when you're back, just raise your hand and we can pick up where we left off.
Sorry, Tori. Okay. Next up, hopefully we can get Tori back to report out from on her lessons learned. Let's pull up the DOH provided outline, please. And while we're getting that pulled up, couple things I wanted to talk about. So I think at this stage of the game, we're looking for kind of just plain language proposals of what we would like to see in the program, and then throughout the process, Department of Health and, the next level at the advisory board, we'll kind of start putting things into more legal regulatory terms. So we don't need to get too technical or anything here, and we want to try and keep this program as simple and as broad as possible, and not over-regulate it, right? So I've been trying to kind of feel that balance out and figure out what exactly is needed, but I think all of us are on a big learning curve right now. So I hope you all bear with the process, and we'll keep plugging away as much as we can. Is that correct, Dominic? Did I mistake anything there?
No, you did, but if I can just add, so one of the things that we do want to make sure, and mind you, this document that we're sharing, it's an outline. This is not by any ways finished draft. It's a starting point. So there'll be some things in here that we've actually put in specifically because in the previous meeting, not just the propagation, but some of the others, these are some of the points that have brought up. And so they're here in many ways just as a starting point, not as a final point. So I just want to make sure that's clear with regard to it. And then the other aspect is we're trying to also ensure as we move potential recommendations for the regulations forward that we are not trying to over-regulate everything that, for example, a cultivator is doing. So when we look at some of this, we're looking at things where there's going to be some limitations, there will be some other items. And Brett, you got to one of my final point before I turn it back over to Chris, but I'll say it now, is that one of the things we're going to do is we're going to get this posted. We have asked for it to be expedited to be posted for this so that everyone can take a look at it before the next meeting, which is proposed right now for the 30th. And so that way, what would happen is people would be able to review it, see what's here, make their notes, and then in the meeting, we would be able to discuss and bring them on up. Because remember, as Chris said earlier, we want to keep this as a transparent process. So we need to have those conversations here in the public in the meeting rather than in other areas as far as for the recommendations themselves. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little bit much, but that's sort of what we're looking at. And the thing to remember, with all of this is within the bounds of the statute. There are some things, and I've said this in some of the other meetings, where people, for example, have requested and said things like, well, why can't I just go to a store, buy it, and use it at home? And it's because it is a medical program that needs to be done in approved locations. And so, regardless of anything else, we have to stay within the bounds of the statute. And so always keep that in mind. I will also put here in just a moment the link to the statute itself into the chat so that people, if you haven't looked at it and read through it before, especially for this committee, I really recommend reading through the entire bill and through the entire statute to understand what some of those limitations and what some of those opportunities are. I hope that helps. Anyway, with that, turn back on over to you, Chris, as far as moving forward, and I will get the link for the regulation, or for the statute rather.
Excellent. Okay, so this is kind of the beginning document we're going to be working from, and I've also created a separate document for just plain language proposals as well that we can kind of then add back into this, and we'll Frankenstein it all together eventually. But so I guess we can just scan through this. The one I know that is going to stick out to a lot of people right off the bat is section 2 here, the authorized species. I want to talk to this real briefly. I'm not opposed, like this is DOH's guidance, right? And I'm not opposed to going against the grain on this if the board, if this committee wants to recommend something different. However, I will say, and I'm actually for having more species and cultivars available to people. I've had a lot of conversations about all of this, and I think it would be a great way for growers to differentiate themselves and for facilitators to have some, a special connection with a certain medicine they use in their practice. And so I am for it. However, with the safety mindedness of this medical psilocybin program, I don't think we're going to get a broad range approved through the next level, which is the advisory board. And if we were to, it still has to be then put into regulation by the Secretary of Health. And I don't think we would get that approved either. So psilocybin cubensis is going to be a given. And if people can find the studies or the documentation showing that others are safe, I think those would be great points to bring up into this board, and then we could recommend more cultivars species to be authorized. But I just don't think that's going to happen immediately. And we can, I think we should continue maybe just reviewing this document, and maybe we can open it up for discussion and proposals afterwards. Okay, so the psilocybin program goes off of a permit structure. It doesn't require a license. Based on my conversations with Dominic, I know we're going to try to keep all permitting, inspection prices, and all of that type of aspects at low cost as possible. So again, these are just starting points for recommendations, and we can continue after we give everybody time to kind of look through these and pick them apart. And I would like to bring it back into discussion next week and edit this document and start making approvals on it. Does that make sense to everybody?
And Chris, if I can just clarify one thing, I just want to say a lot of this comes, it's not necessarily that it's recommendation from the department. It's based in, as far as from the different statutes and regulations from Colorado, Oregon, some of the proposals from some of the other states, such as Maryland and Massachusetts, and some other areas sort of kind of cobbled together, quite frankly. And then what we've also done is based upon comments that have been made in other meetings, not just propagation, but for example, there's been quite a few comments made in like the equity meeting, in the research meeting, and in other areas, so that we have that. And Greg, like I said, what we're doing is we're going to post this online, trying to post it all into the chat right now. This is just so that people have an idea. This is what's coming up, so that we have that there. And we're still have a little bit that we're actually working as far as putting it into it so that we can get it posted here in the next couple of days. So we're going to have that again. This is more just so people have an idea and are able to think about some of the questions, and so that we have that moving forward. But I can increase the size a little bit. So I'll increase the size a little. Hopefully that helps with being able to view it.
Are there any questions so far on anything before we continue moving on? Okay. All right. Johnny.
We have one. Yeah, 1 second. Johnny, go ahead.
I think possibly just for clarity for everybody, it might just be good to literally just read through, just so everybody has a chance to just see the contents, because I think just scanning it a couple, like it, just views on that might, I don't know if everybody's gonna get the information they need.
Okay, I can read it if you'll go back up to the top, Dominic.
And,
All right.
and Chris, if you like, I can read it through. I'm happy to do so.
I think you've got a better reading voice than I do, Dominic, so go ahead.
Sure. Okay. All right. So we'll just start. Purpose and scope. It's establish a regulated framework for the lawful propagation, production, testing, and preparation of psilocybin products in New Mexico. Emphasize public health, safety, consistency, and traceability. Minimize duplication by utilizing existing state, county, and municipal licensing and inspection authorities. And then I see there's a hand raised.
Yes, Des Garcia, I have enabled your mic. Please go ahead. Pardon me, you may now speak if you'd like. Okay. It seems they've lowered their hands, Dominic. You may go ahead.
Okay.
If if you please raise your hand again if you wish to speak, and I will make sure to address that.
No worries. And Ishmael, just because with going through the reading, it's hard for me to look at both screens. So if someone else raises their hand, if you can just keep an eye, and please interrupt me. Don't worry about that part.
Perfect.
I will not
Okay.
take it as being rude. So, all right. So the second part, authorized species. Psilocybe cubensis shall be the authorized species for cultivation and production. Other species or cultivars may be considered for approval upon submission to the department with evidence. Recommend at least 3 peer-reviewed studies demonstrating safety and potency. The exception to this is for research proposals, which will be determined once the Medical Psilocybin Research Fund process and protocols are promulgated and based on funding capacity. And I'm pausing just in case. Anybody
We have
has
one comment in the
questions.
chat. Attendees, can you increase the size of your screen by just basically zooming in a little bit more, Dominic?
I was just giving instructions how attendees can increase the size of your screen.
Pardon me. Sorry, I thought that was. I was thinking.
That's me.
I know, Jorge.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of different ways that you can do that. If you notice in the bottom left-hand corner, there's Dominic's name and a minus and plus that can resize. You can also click on the pop-out button on your menu bar, and that'll actually take the presentation out of this mode and enlarge it. A couple different ways to do that.
Thank you, Kathy. And as you all can tell, we here in the program try to enjoy what we're doing, which is why you'll hear laughter on a regular basis from us. We take it very seriously, but still, we should all enjoy life as much as we can. In any case, so number 3, permit structure. Primary psilocybin production permit issued by the department, required for cultivation, harvest, processing, packaging. Applying persons, and just as a note here, persons just is the legal term that's used for organizations, companies, all of that. So I know it sounds a little odd when you're saying just persons in this context, but you may hear that in various areas. But that means the organization or the company that's doing this. Applying persons can apply for one or any aspect of the permit. Demonstrate psilocybin containing mushrooms products are kept in a secure location. Double locks, video surveillance, alarm system, keypad entry. And then business, facility, and occupancy compliance. Proof of ownership of the land, facility, or written approval from the owner, i.e. lease specifying use to include psilocybin cultivation and production. Business license in the state of New Mexico. Proof of registration with New Mexico State Secretary of State, local building and safety authorities, including certificate of occupancy, fire code compliance, electric and HVAC inspections, and no new psilocybin specific building standards unless explicitly necessary. And the reason we say that is well, you'll see here in a little bit as far as local areas and governments may require additional items. Zoning and municipal permits must be within the geographical boundaries of New Mexico. City and county planning or zoning departments, land use to pardon me, everyone, it has been a little bit of a long day, but land use approval, conditional use permits where applicable, for example, City of Albuquerque raw food permit, food safety training certification for employees, and note that local governments retain zoning authority consistent with existing agriculture or light industrial classifications. From the agricultural standpoint, note we are still seeking some more information regarding this. New Mexico Department of Agriculture, NMDA, and we do, by the way, hope that some of those who are engaging in cultivation currently for other mushrooms and other potential vegetables and plants might be able to assist with regard to the licensing side as far as determining exactly what's needed. But to ensure that that all cultivators utilize pest and contamination mitigation guidance from NMDA. Production is treated analogously to controlled environment agriculture. Cultivation standards. Well, and before I go on, any questions or comments so far? Okay. Cultivation standards. Growth medium. Growth medium is not restricted. All substrates and inputs must be documented, tracked by batch, and fully disclosed on final product labeling. Environmental controls. Indoor or controlled environment cultivation required. Controls documented for temperature, humidity, air exchange. Biosecurity measures to prevent cross-contamination. No pesticides or fungicides utilized. Okay, and there is a question here.
There
I
is
see a
indeed. I was
hand.
just about to, yep.
Perfect.
That's Shane McDaniel. Please go ahead. I've enabled your mic. Unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, I just want to validate something. By air exchange, are you talking about they'll need to monitor CO2 levels? Or just some minute per hour air exchange, or by cubic foot? How are we, or do you know how they're gonna expect environmental controls on air exchange?
Shane, that is actually a part of what needs to be determined. So it's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have
a comment there in the chat as well, Dominic?
Before we do that, Shane, do you have a recommendation on which direction? I know that you've done some cultivation yourself, so.
So generally when they're talking about air exchange, they're talking about making sure that the CO2 levels are low enough and they don't get too high. So I would say the air exchange needs to be done through CO2 monitoring. And when the CO2 levels get too high, it turns on a fan that or an exhaust or something that gets the air exchanged, right?
Sure. Okay, great. So I put in for CO2 levels and monitoring. Okay, thank you. We don't have to, the good part about regulations is we don't have to get into details as to, what exactly those mechanisms as far as like fans, that sort of thing. But that's good to know. It's actually very helpful. So thank you. And then Ishmael, I think you said there was something in the chat.
Yes, there's a comment in the chat. Fungal GNAT remediation may be something to address. This is from Gregory Evans, and he goes on to say FAE is a common cultivation concept for mushrooms.
So what I'm hearing is that there may need to be fungicides utilized, but still no on pesticides. Is that correct?
I will see what they have to say. Esteban says, I would think FAE would be adequate as specific CO2 levels do not pose consumer risk when isolated as a single factor. Alan Thomas then says, I disagree with CO2 monitoring. It is expensive and unnecessary for the most part. Remember, everyone, if you wish to comment, you can also speak. Just remember, raise your hand and we can enable your mic.
Can I get somebody willing to talk to me? What is what are we talking with the FAE? I'm assuming the last two are air exchange. But
so we have Gregory there with their hand raised. I will Gregory, your mic is enabled if you care to speak or answer the question that was posed by Chris as well.
Yeah, Chris. FAE is just a common term for, or like an acronym for fresh air exchange. The concept of fresh air exchange in mycological growth is one of the triggers that causes primordia to develop on the surface of a substrate. Adjusting the CO2 levels during the process of a grow is something that is highly variable depending on context and purpose. There are genetic isolations that do well in high CO2 environments, such as grow bags, and there are other variants, like more wild variants, that are going to do better with way more air. As far as monitoring it, I think that should be a facility's decision. I think that there is a huge value from a research perspective, and in, like, say we have like a growing software that monitors your growth cycle and your harvest. It could be an option in that, but I don't think it should be something that is defined in this recommendation to say you need this level of CO2. I just think that would be over regulating.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg. So what
Is
I'm
that
kind of
clear?
hearing.
Any more?
Yeah, no. That was really helpful, Greg. And so what I'm actually hearing with regard to all of this, and I'm just trying to do it so I document it, is that it's as far as ensuring that there's just to ensure there's a fresh air exchange with regard to that. Is that what I'm getting on it? And if I could get from people, if you could do a thumbs up in the, use the emoticons, the react button. Does that work? Or is that what people are talking about?
We have a few comments in the chat here, I think, talking about it. Alan Thomas specifies that P. cubensis do not need frequent air exchange. Twice daily for a limited time is sufficient. Esteban Hernandez says, honestly, FAE may not even be a relevant parameter, as many growers use in vitro grow methods such as bags and tubs. James Ferreira says, are we just talking facility, as a simple home CO2 detector should be sufficient. CO2 is not related to personal safety. And we also have John there. Sorry, mushrooms actually need some CO2 to induce pinning. That's all the comments there in the chat.
So this seems like a business decision and maybe something that we should completely take out of this document and not need to have regulations on. That's the kind of take I'm getting from everybody here.
If I'm still permitted, I would suggest that from a regulation standpoint, we would strike all of this. I think environmental controls around safety, fire protection, health, employees, like spore count in the air for employees, stuff like that, could be valuable from a facility regulation perspective. As far as like techniques for growing, I think that those are IP and, you know, more specific to the individual grower, as long as they don't cross like a safety threshold.
Right. And thank you. That's actually really important. And that's a part of, as what we're talking about, or what I was mentioning in the beginning, is we do not want to be over-regulating. So if this is a difference in just how somebody is growing and it's not actually something that needs to be regulated, we do want to remove it. So I did see, as you were saying that, and I think that was Greg that you were speaking, but I did see multiple thumbs up during that point when you were saying that as far as removing. Can I get thumbs up again if that is indeed the idea that this is not something that's needed from a regulatory standpoint, but really just is an individual cultivator's preference in their growing practices?
I can see the grower showed up today.
I'm seeing that. Yes, no, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear. By the way, if anybody hasn't figured out, I'm actually more for less regulation than for more regulation. So, okay, that sounds great. If that's okay, we'll go ahead and move on. And I've struck that, by the way, out of this.
And I'll mute.
Yep. Thank you. All right. So where were we? Oh, the next question was about fungicide. That was something in the chat. Sorry, let me go back and see. Was that something that we need to just leave in for the moment, or that we needs to be looked at? Is that again something that the idea being is that if fungicides are used, we're going to have to test for them, just to let everybody know. If it is that they are not allowed, then while we would still have to test in the end product, it would not be tested at other points. What are people thinking regarding that? And I bring it up because there was the comment in the chat, but I can't find it myself at the moment.
I believe the point was by Eric Barlow, who stated, if sterilized through the process, you shouldn't need any fungicides or pesticides from my experience. And this is here, I'm speaking as Eric. Fungicides kill fungus, lol, not needed. That was Eric Barker.
Okay. So what I'm kind of hearing right now is to leave the no fungicides utilized, correct?
Yeah, so far we have a hand up by Gregory Evans. Gregory, do you have any points?
Opinion about everything. Again, this goes down to cultivator preference. When we are cultivating mushrooms, we are creating an environment that is ideal for multiple organisms to grow in a controlled environment. Whereas out in nature, they like trichoderma, for example, doesn't outcompete mushrooms. They all find their own space. There are certain fungus and bacteria that will grow in your substrate and outcompete your mycelium if not sterilized properly. We don't want to force, if we are not going to control substrate, we do not want to force people to sterilize their substrate. There are certain substrates that do better in pasteurization, keeping wild, competing bacteria in the process of growing, like beneficial bacteria, things that cause the mycelium to strengthen in a certain way or whatever. If, say, you're growing in an open air warehouse where you just have racks with heating over them, but open air flowing, you may want to utilize a fungicide in your substrate to prevent certain types of funguses from outcompeting your intended mycelial growth. I can provide a paper on that.
Sure. So the question then is, and here's where this is part of where the balance comes in, is if we allow for fungicides to be used, that means they have to be tested for.
I don't think that's I mean that it is a cost on the far end of it, but we do need to be, I don't know, maybe we just pin it and talk about what what testing looks like and what the costs are and what the requirements are. When something goes to market, we need to do our best efforts to hit FDA standards, whether they're involved or not. Like, we need to be like 10 times ahead of those standards. I'll yield to Scott. I see he's got something to say.
Yes, and before we get to Scott, we just have two comments in the chat. Bo Farley stating, aren't there already standards for pesticide use for consumable mushrooms? That was their comment. And then you have Alan, testing for contamination will be necessary, including molds in the final product. Estevan, trichoderma and hypermyces, mitigation can be done organically. Hydrogen peroxide can be used within USDA organic compliance. Those are the comments there. Scott Faulkman, I have your mic is enabled. Please begin when ready.
Thank you. I wanted to reflect on the testing of fungicides, because in the cannabis space, there are several different pesticides that are required to be tested for regardless of their use or not, because secondary contamination can occur even if it's unintentional. So my opinion is that testing for the fungicides will be probably necessary anyways. And in most analytical labs that would be doing the testing for the psilocybin potency, they would be able to do the fungicide testing there as well. And I would also like to comment that the other possible biological contaminants will need to be tested for, and the same thing with cannabis. There are Aspergillus, E. coli, and Salmonella are all tested for already on flower that's grown in the field. And if these are going to need to be tested for anyway, I think the decision of whether or not to use fungicide is probably up to the grower, but it probably needs to be required regardless of whether it's allowed to be used or not.
Thank you, Scott.
Those are all comments so far.
Okay. All right. So is it, again, basically what people are saying is to just simply remove fungicides from this location? Can I get thumbs up if it is to remove it from here? I'm not seeing it. Oh, there's one, two, a couple others. Okay, so we'll take that on out. All right, fantastic. Thank you. So this is exactly the kinds of things that we were talking about that we wanted to be able to do. All right, so batch, harvesting, processing, and homogenization. Batch definition. A batch defined as a single harvest lot processed under uniform conditions, no regulated size requirement. Batches must be fully homogenized prior to testing. Homogenization requirements, that physical homogenization is required to ensure consistent potency across the batch. And the purpose behind this just is accurate potency testing, reduction of dose variability. Okay,
We have
and
a
that's
hand
just what
up
we
there.
have there.
Gregory Evans, your mic is enabled. Please go ahead.
Me again. I see there's a bunch of comments. I just think that we're running the risk with this language of preventing whole fruit distribution, and I just want to call that out. I think that batch sampling from, say you have a 10-pound harvest, you send like X amount of that, whatever percentage is defined by law, to the facility that is testing. They pull random sampling that are, defined in their protocols, their SOPs, and then they homogenize that for testing. Just
thank you very much for that. And we have a comment there from Shane McDaniel. For the same reason, should we even regulate temperature and humidity requirements? And Dominic there, those were also removed, Shane. Next, we have Scott Faulkman. Your mic is enabled, Scott, please.
Hi, hello again. So I totally agree with the idea of the physical homogenization. I'd just like to point out that sometimes during the homogenization process, it can cause the decomposition of psilocybin, and there's going to need to be a careful approach to how the homogenization is done if it's done to a full batch, because it also makes it prone to oxidation, and so you'd have to be very careful about whole body mushrooms that have been homogenized into a powder, for example, and how they're stored subsequently.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Brett Phelps. Your mic is enabled. Please begin when ready.
All right. Yeah, thanks guys. So I have an issue here with this definition of batch and how it's used compared to, you know, how the batches and testing is done in the medical cannabis, and the idea that a batch is a single harvest lot. Rather than splitting up batches into lots for more specific testing. I think this is the exact issue that happened in Oregon that led to really exploding testing costs. When you're talking about every single harvest event being a new batch that requires testing, the way that mushrooms are harvested, you know, through different flushes. Essentially you have, you know, if you do a flush on Monday and then you do a flush again on your second flush on Wednesday, that are in the exact same, you know, it's in the exact same substrate, exact same growing conditions, everything else. To have those then have to both be tested separately when they're essentially all the same and could be broken up in a different way, I think is going to lead to some exploding costs in the way that things are done. If we look at the cannabis regulations, you know, your batches are an identified quantity that's harvested during the same specified time period with all the same cultivation. And then within those batches, you can test lots, and that also helps if you have recall issues or things like that. You're not having to destroy an entire you know, an entire bit if it's only a small bit that's actually a problem. And so I think I think really looking at that and how this definition as it was used in Oregon, I think was a huge part of the problem that led to the, you know, the exploding of costs there that has, you know, led to a lot of these places going out of business already. As well as, yeah, how we do it in the medical cannabis side. You know, I think that's definitely something that should be looked at. I think that, you know, it allowing for lot testing. We'll be able to make things much more pinpointed. Additionally, yeah, if you do it over a time aggregate, you know, you're not going to have this exploding number of batches that all have to be tested. The no size limits, I think, can lead to arbitrary outcomes as far as what's considered a batch here, and those type of things. So I think that's just an area that should definitely take a closer look at and think about, do we want to do this exactly how Oregon did, or do we want to do it, you know, closer to how we do it in medical cannabis in a way that is more functional for the producers.
Thank you for that. We have some comments in the chat just to bring up. Alan Thomas says, physical homogenization is somewhat vague. Fruits will be a variety of sizes. Will always be harvested if you maintain a constant harvesting schedule. This is followed up by a comment by James Ferreira. Mushrooms don't seem to care about our schedule when it comes to fruiting. Followed up by hands up by Estevan. Please, I have enabled your mic. Go ahead.
Yes, when it comes to testing standards, batch definition, homogenization, all of that, I think, is neatly tied up and analyzed through relative standard deviation. For example, in Oregon, they have a pass-fail line at 20% relative standard deviation on a lot, meaning if there's more than a 20% difference in testing parameter, excuse me, potency testing from low end to high end, then the batch would fail. I think that's a good sort of benchmark for homogenization of whole fruiting body. Additionally, they do have a lot definition of a batch being smaller than 1 kilogram, which I would think would be pretty reasonable.
Thank you for that. We have another comment in the chat there, John, who says that the powderization will also cause the product to become even more hydrophilic than the whole fruits. Finally, we have Gregory Evans. Gregory, your mic is enabled. Please go ahead. Gregory?
Unmuting the mic helps. I wanted to say I think this whole section deserves a work group. I think that coming together and like just hammering language on this concept like could be something to come back with like a more defined, refined suggestion. I know that there's, like I could do that by myself and everyone could do them by themselves. I would love to see some of the minds get together, but again, need to do that within the compliance of the whatever statute that is. As far as batches, it could be argued that like a single inoculation point. So so in Colorado they have like you can do this number of this size tubs, right? We don't want to like tell people they have to grow in tubs or tell people they have to grow in a way. But like say we have like, say I'm a cultivator, I have 500 bags and I have enough liquid culture that I have prepared to inoculate those bags. That inoculation can produce 4, 5, 6 flushes, depending on the cultivar, out of that unique cake inside that bag. If we could define that as a batch, that would leave a lot of room for kind of like final output testing, just to kind of brainstorming.
I think the intention on this is to leave it as broad as we can, and that way batch size isn't necessarily pinned down. And if you harvest 10 pounds of mushrooms, then you would have the same testing requirements as if you harvested, 1 pound of mushrooms under those uniform conditions, which I would imagine is, that inoculation or however you're growing those mushrooms and but the larger sample size you take, right, it would really come down to that standard deviation that Esteban was mentioning.
Yeah, and that puts it into a conversation about scale and like, do we have small growers and boutique growers and large scale facilities? Is this full on agriculture? Is this like a craft that somebody designs for Etsy? I will yield.
We have James Ferreira with their hand up. James, you may speak.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tricky nuances here. When you think about the process, it's not just, a single flush. You'll have a bag that might flush 5 times. And the consistency of the psilocybin in each of those flushes could be quite a bit different. And typically it's a week cycle. But if you're a large producer and maybe you've got, 50 or 100 bags going, then, that would make a lot of sense to be testing weekly as you harvest dry and then, powder them. But for a smaller producer, if you're testing 4 times a month at, $200 a pop, that's going to get really expensive unless you're a fairly large operation. So, I guess the concept would be you'd want to be able to go through several flushes, dry them, and then powder them all at once, and then do your testing so that you're not, so you might have monthly cycles as opposed to weekly cycles or daily cycles, just depending on the size of the operation. And it does leave out, how do you handle fresh? If we even say fresh is okay, how do we handle that? Because that's going to vary quite a bit, and there's probably not enough time to send off fresh mushrooms to get tested, get the results back, and then ship them to a provider before they go bad, right? Because they only last about 2 weeks in the fridge.
Thank you for that. We have a hand up there by Brett Phelps. Please, your mic is enabled. Please begin when ready.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to really echo what James had just brought up of the, taking into consideration the current, as James was describing under the current definition there, each one of those would all have to be tested, which I think for a large industrial producer is going to be great, or not a problem. But if we're really looking to, have this be something that's available to small New Mexico businesses that doing it under this current definition is going to be cost prohibitive.
Thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder, the situation here and what we're kind of doing is to go over these to also find the points that we really need to be focusing in a little bit more and the different areas. And I will tell you the language on this has actually changed several times as we were doing it. And as you all have heard in this, different people have different ideas on how to do that. So what I would recommend is we put a pin on this conversation for the moment. And when we come back next week, or in the week and a half, that we devote some time to actually crafting what the language should be. So that gives people time to think about it. And how do we exactly define this? Because remember, the part that we're looking at, and this is why some of the language, as I say, is a little more broad at the moment, with some specificity to bring out the discussion, is because we're going to be looking at this from an angle of how do we actually encourage there to be as different cultivators? How do we encourage that without creating a situation where it does price everybody out if they're at a smaller size versus a larger size, and so that there can be variation in those companies, organizations, or people who are growing. And we want to try to be able to do that. And it's a very difficult prospect, quite frankly. And so we want your help with it. And that's why we wanted to present today, have some discussion, but really getting into the details in the next meeting. And as much as I also like, some people have said, can we get a few people together separately? Again, then we hit into the whole idea that this is supposed to be those few people together separately. And we don't want to create subgroups of subgroups of subgroups. We want to keep it here so that it's transparent, it's public. And if it means we take a little bit of time, if it takes 30 minutes to go through and figure out that language, then that's what we do. And that's that part of it. And so really, so far, what we're seeing is this is the biggest area so far that we're coming across. But as we get this posted up, please do read through it. Again, we'll have it within the next couple of business days to be able to be up and then be able to go through it. But with that, if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to go ahead and continue moving forward with us knowing that this idea of the homogenization and the batch is an area that we need to focus on in the next meeting. Is that okay and acceptable?
Sounds good, Dominic. One thing I heard somebody might be in the waiting room. So if we got people waiting, can we please admit them?
There's nobody in the waiting room. Yeah, we're pretty quick on that part, but yeah, sometimes we do miss. So thank you for letting us know just in case. Okay. Testing and quality assurance. And this, by the way, is the other part where we're going to need additional information. I will tell you, we have gotten inundated with various proposals, ideas behind how testing should occur. So I just want to make sure that everybody realizes that when we get to this, this is a part that we need a lot of assistance, different ideas, and really working through this committee to determine what happens. So just to make sure everybody's aware of that part as we go into it. So testing authority. Testing is performed by department-approved laboratories. Requirements for laboratories to be approved. And this first part is something that we've mentioned several times, is that existing cannabis testing laboratories. And so what we've talked about in some of the other meetings is that, for example, if somebody has already gone through the testing process and gotten approved to be a cannabis testing laboratory in New Mexico, then they just would have to do a simple application to apply, show they're in good standing, and then they would be also approved to test for psilocybin. ISO IEC 17025 accredited labs, and then labs approved or overseen by the department. Just so people understand, when we're talking labs approved or overseen by the department, we're really talking about the state lab department, so SLD, for those who are familiar with it. Okay, and I see Scott Folkman has a hand up.
Hi. So I think it's a great idea to use the cannabis testing laboratories, but I would point out that the extraction and testing of psilocybin is quite a bit different than potency testing for cannabis because of the nature of the chemistry involved. Psilocybin is a rather fragile molecule that has to be extracted properly in order for consistent, accurate analysis, as opposed to THC or THCA that's relatively robust and quite easy to test for. So I think that any cannabis labs that want to transition to do both should still have SOPs, and they should still have an accreditation where they are able to accurately identify the amount of psilocybin in a known batch.
Thank you for that. We have one comment from Gregory. Are we going to be recommended standards for testing SOPs? And next one from James, going back to permits, it seemed like there were several types. Need to scroll up. Which ones would be required to test?
Okay, I'll tackle James's first because that's really easy. This would be a separate type of permit. Those others were with regard to harvesting or cultivation and harvest aspect. This is actually testing, which would be a different permit. So we have that. And Greg, as far as the standards for testing SOPs, that's actually a part of it. That's a part of what needs to be developed. So, okay, and so moving forward, oh, Scott?
Yep, we have, yeah.
Hey, sorry. So for the cannabis testing, there is not a required SOP format. However, SOPs are required. So currently each testing lab is required to develop their own SOPs that are functional. And I think that makes sense here as well, because there are different ways to test different instruments. Some are more or less expensive, but I think in the end, as long as there's accuracy, then I think that it'll work. And I think having a standard set of SOPs that are required to be followed would be over-regulating.
Thank you, Scott.
And next we have Gregory. Please go ahead.
I'm just reading through this, and stop me if we've already gotten to this. But I think at some point we should define alkaloids to report on a minimum like panel. And then also, like, you know, market can allow for extended testing and stuff like that. Like, we're not going to require testing for, you know, research type things. Whereas, like, we should definitely hit the top 5, like the main active alkaloids. But I don't know,
Greg,
like, how do we define that?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. That is actually further down where it has some of those. And again, some of those, like, for example, Estevan has in the chat right now about some of the particular requirement from Colorado. And that's actually part of what we're going to be asking. And we're going to be asking for a little bit more in the next meeting. Again, this is just sort of the generalized framework at the moment. Those specifics we do need to be added, though.
Definitely. Would we want to bring in? I mean, I have a few people that I would bring into that conversation if it's on the schedule. As far as like really detailed SMEs in that space. Also, that 4-ACO DMT thing, man. Like, people in Colorado are just throwing things in their batches wildly. Like, people are pumping their stock.
Yeah, and again, Greg, people are welcome to come to this meeting to be able to participate and contribute. And you know, this is something we're going to be looking at in the next meeting. So
cool, definitely. I'll let a few people know. Thank you. Okay.
And so I'm going to go ahead and continue to move forward. So again, required testing panels. And again, this is the part that there's going to be, we need to get, and we would like from this group without us really saying, here's what you do. But we did put an example in with regard to heavy metals, just so everybody's aware. But it is just an example. And so we would like the same as far as microbial and some of the other potential contaminants. So testing occurs once the batch is homogenized and end products. If the product is older than 6 months, it needs to be retested. The department can require additional tests if there are complaints, concerns, or at random. No cultivation or processing facility will be asked to test more than 4 times a year with regard to random testing, except if there are contaminants or false statements made by the organization, facility, or on the labels. Just as a note about that, what we're trying to do, the 4 times a year is really just a starting point as far as a talking point. What we wanted to do is we want to ensure that While I don't think that I would be turning around and asking cultivators to test all the time, it is possible that someone down the road could do that. We wanted to make sure there were also protections for the cultivators, so that if there's somebody who, for example, just doesn't like them, that they're not suddenly getting required to test all the time because of a personal issue. And so we wanted to make sure that there are protections there as well. And so that's why we have that as far as the random testing, except if there are complaints or other contaminants found. So just as an example, potency, psilocybin and psilocin concentration equivalency. And I'm not going to try to read all of this because, quite frankly, my Latin is pretty good, but it's not that good. But it does have the 5 bases, which I think Greg was getting at earlier. Contaminant testing, and we have here microbial, heavy metals, and as I said, this is the example for the heavy metal testing. Pesticides, fungicides, and then residual solvents. And if there are other areas where we need to add in, of course, that is something that we would want to potentially do down the road. Or, I mean, we would want to add in at the next meeting. Thank you. Scott, I see your hand has raised.
Yes, so I just wanted to make a comment on the heavy metals. Those actually do add a significant cost in terms of testing. So in the cannabis space, typically the soil and the water are tested. If municipal water is used, it's not tested. It's not required to be tested, but the soil is required to be tested. I don't think a lot of cultivators are actually doing that. But I just wanted to point that out, that if heavy metals testing is required, it will add a significant cost to the analysis because it requires a completely different set of instruments that are rather expensive.
Thank you,
we
Scott.
have a message in the chat as well. That 6-month retest, is that for wholesale stock at the bulk level and not for the packaged products, right?
Well, that's a part of what has to be determined, Greg. In part, it's going to depend on whether it's already packaged.
Fantastic. And there's another little comment there from Alan Thomas. Yearly usage in Oregon is about 15 kilos per year for the whole state. Based on information from the state in the first 4 months of 2025, this is definitely going to be a niche industry. Overregulation will make it economically unfeasible quickly. Expensive testing will do the same.
Mm-hmm. And as I said, yeah, thank you, Alan. That's one of the reasons. And also thank you to Scott with regard to the comment about the cost on the heavy metals, is that's a part of why we don't want to create a situation where it is going to be economically unfeasible. We do recognize that. And so that's a part of why we're bringing this all here. And again, as I said, this example with the heavy metals is an example. So we definitely want to hear, as far as in the next meeting, especially as far as what people think is going to be viable, what is going to be workable, and how we actually set those limits to ensure that testing does not price people out of the industry. So I want to really make that part clear, because there are people who have said you must test for all of these things, and I'll be quite frank, it's in some cases I'm like, if we're testing for that, there's actually going to be no product left even after the grows for people to even utilize. So how can we do that much testing? And others who have said absolutely no testing. So we have to figure out what's going to be safest for people and yet still allow for this to work economically. Does that help? Okay. All right. I'll continue to move forward. So batch release, only batches, of course, that pass all required testing may be released for use. All right. And then food preparation and product handling. This really is any conversion of raw material into ingestible or prepared products is subject to food safety oversight. For example, through environmental health, food safety divisions. What we would be requesting and requiring is that people go through the appropriate food safety and handling training certification that is different in different municipalities and counties through the state. For example, Albuquerque and Bernalillo County have their own, whereas in other areas of the state, there are different ones that are there. And of course, no exemptions from standard food safety requirements. And that's where we are at the moment. Any questions, comments about that last bit before we jump forward to the next? No? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate, we've got one, sorry, I missed that.
We have James there with their hands up.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was thinking more about, compartmentalizing, businesses. So you may just grow fruiting bodies, fresh ones, and then send them to a business that is a more of a manufacturer that dries them and, turns them into some kind of a product, chocolates or whatever. Would they, I mean, obviously, it seems like you would only require the testing for the final stage, but do we have it in a way that you could do that, where you have different businesses doing different things, but not everybody has to test, because at some point that's going to kill things like Oregon is doing, where it's just so expensive for a patient to receive care.
Thank you, James. That's actually a great comment, and it is actually why I've scrolled back up to that part where the permits would be for, and again, these were the ones that, as we've looked at other things, cultivation, harvest, processing, packaging, and then that applying persons can apply for one or any aspect of the permit. So that would allow exactly what you're talking about.
Now, Dominic, we have just one comment in the chat, which I thought I'd highlight by John Neslick. I have to leave the meeting. I just wanted to suggest that we have a sunset clause in there so we can give locals a chance.
Okay, so here's something that I'd like to say as far as sunset clauses. A lot of people are talking about them. There are certain requirements that we have to do with regard to commerce laws and that we can do. And so we would love for it to be New Mexico companies, New Mexico, people and individuals who live in New Mexico. The language behind that is very tricky. So what I would request for the next meeting is that people come with some language with regard to what they would like the sunset clause. And so, for example, in some cases, again, this is different things that we've heard in different ways, is that it should only be New Mexico companies that do this. How do you prove that it's a New Mexico company? What does that mean? They do have to have business license in New Mexico. They have to be registered with Secretary of State, all of those sort of things. But other companies can do that as well. So how do you actually define that? How do you actually ensure that that's the case? Because, for example, you may end up having someone who is a part owner in a company who lives in a different state, and then another owner who lives in New Mexico. How do you divide that on up? And so thinking about some of those sort of things in order to be able to do that. And I do know, and Esteban, I see your hand up, so I'll get to you in just a moment. Some people have said just do what they've done in Oregon. There have been some problems with that particular approach as well. But we want to make sure that, yes, if we can figure out a way for it to be New Mexico and New Mexico focused, that is, of course, what we would prefer as well. So Esteban, go ahead.
Thank you, Dominic. In regard to the sunset clause, the precedent from Oregon was that, being a sunset clause, it does have a set expiration date for them. I believe it was 4 years after program inception. Their metric they're using there is 2 years of residence, so proof of residence, and additionally, at least 51% ownership of the business applying for the license. I would say that is beyond a fair requirement. And again, the spirit of the requirement is really what I think is looking to be honored here, the idea that we give New Mexico residents, folks who have been doing all the groundwork here to kind of help build and develop this program, a fair and equitable chance to access the supply chain.
Thank you for that. We also have Shane McDaniel there. Shane, begin when ready.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, when we're talking about a permit for cultivation, for harvesting, for, what was it, processing and production or something? I can't remember what the four were up there. Packaging. Would there not just be one permit that covers all of that, or are we going to go like Colorado and require different permits for every step of the way, even though it's all going to be done in the same facility, right? Somebody doesn't grow it and then hire somebody else to come in and harvest it and then hire somebody else to package it. It's all done in the same location. So requiring 3 different permits is probably going to be 3 different expenses that, make it more expensive to get into the space.
So two things with that, Shane, is one, and this is, and the other part is with regard to that they're just different aspects. And so anybody who is applying for the permit would be able to apply for either one or any of those. As James was pointing out, you might down the road, it may not happen initially, but down the road where different cultivators who are harvesting may then turn around and send it elsewhere for processing and packaging, as an example. These are not, and again, these can be changed. This is part of why we bring them up, because these are part of what has happened and what people have brought up as different areas with regard to permitting. But it would be one permit, and organizations would just apply for those portions which they think are applicable to them. The other aspect of it is I would like everybody to remember the Department of Health is not going to be having a permit fee. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the other aspects of this won't have costs, such as certificate of occupancy for that inspection, those sort of things. But the Department of Health, as far as this permitting process, is not going to have a fee in and of itself.
Okay. So one other thing then that we need to discuss then is if it's going to be done that way where they, do some of it in one place and then move it over to another place, is the transportation what we're going to have to require for security, or right? Because that's going to have to be part of the permit too, right? Just like it is with cannabis, right? I can't be transporting cannabis without a permit, right?
You are correct, Shane. That is the next step. Remember, everybody, we don't have everything down yet. If we tried to put everything in, we would never get finished. Yes, Eric, no. So just, yes, you are correct. That is actually one of the next stages.
We have a hand up there by Brett. Please, Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question, because I didn't hear anything on it. Is there going to be any kind of cap on the number of permits that are issued? And if so, how is that going to be determined?
Brett, that's a great question. And that's actually a question for this group and for the board.
I guess then I would just put out there that I would not support any caps on the number of permits. Be my position. Yeah, haven't seen how it went down in the medical cannabis side and all that. Yeah, but that's my position.
Fantastic. And we also have a little comment in the chat there. Just wants to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Would we would probably initially cap it, right, Dominic, for the kind of soft rollout next year, and then as the full program gets rolled out, then that cap would kind of come off, I would assume.
What I would say is, to be honest, and sort of to kind of address that with Brett, is that yes, when medical cannabis first started, there were only a certain amount of licenses that were allowed, and part of the reason behind that was actually because of quite frankly, the difference between state and federal at that time. While on paper that hasn't really changed from a cultural standpoint, it is very different nowadays. And one of the things that we were constantly doing, quite frankly, under multiple administrations, is the medical cannabis program, was consistently requesting to approve additional licenses and was not given permission to be able to do that. So I think with my saying that, you kind of know where my thoughts are as far as caps versus no caps. And there is a comment from James in the chat that says no cap, the market demand should manage that. And I would say that is a very clear and a very good statement. And I'll leave it at that. It'll happen naturally through the market is my belief. But again, that is actually a consideration that this group would need to make a determination on. But you will notice we just didn't mention caps at all anywhere in this document. Yeah, and there are comments in the chat rather that pretty much just say that as well. So I don't know that we need to read it, but there is one other comment. And I'm sorry, my screen is really small,
that's
Ishmael.
Alan Thomas. He says, I will also research testing requirements before the next meeting. Most growing substrates are pure grain with no actual soil involved in the grow. Hence, there may be no need for certain tests. So that was the real that was the one that was separate from the rest. But and there was another comment there by Shane. Spawn is done with grain, but there are many types of substrates, including soil. I believe Colorado is limiting substrate to exclude dung. I disagree with that, Shane says. These are not my opinions.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, Gregory Evans has their hands up.
Okay.
Okay, please go ahead.
Kind of a random, maybe not totally random, but currently the regulations on mycelium until it becomes a fruiting body is not something that's like federally regulated. There are a few states that don't allow spores and stuff like that. And then it's kind of this gray area if we have myceliated grain, right? Does myceliated grain test at a potency that we're tracking, or will the state allow that as an independent, unregulated industry all by itself? And do we start regulating at the moment we inoculate bulk substrate, or at the point that we begin to fruit? And like kind of like, where is there room for like side industries to exist outside of the regulatory complex, and like where do we define that line? I hope that makes sense.
That does, Greg. We are mostly concerned at this point with regard to the medical application and program and cultivation at this time.
You know, that is something I think we need to kind of delineate pretty early in this process, though, is we should probably be using, and I could be wrong here, but whole fruiting body mushroom, no myceliated biomasses or other products like that. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Am I wrong?
No hands up. No hands up.
I would concur.
Who else agrees that we should have whole mushroom fruiting body only and not myceliated products?
Alan Thomas says, I agree. We have a hands up there by James Ferreira. James, do go ahead.
I was just going to say, what about truffles? But actually, there was another one. I think it was Evan asked a question there on the delineation of different types. So you may just want to do liquid culture and supply everybody in the state with liquid culture, and that might be, one business is doing that. And so I can see how you could have a lot of different levels here in the cultivation process.
We have a comment as well in the chat just to bring up by Esteban. Per New Mexico Supreme Court precedent, unharvested mushrooms / substrate are not considered a violation of drug trafficking laws as they are inadequate. Natural state of mushroomness, lol, considered not inadequate. That's
yeah. Autocorrect is not our friend. Okay. Okay, and so just at this point, again, if anybody had missed it, we're going to be requesting this document be put up as soon as possible. What we will do once it is up is we will send a message to the people who are here on this meeting so that you are aware that it is up on the website. Please give a couple of business days because it does take a little bit of time for us to be able to get this through our IT tickets for them to be able to post. So thank you, everybody. And then I look forward to those conversations in the next meeting. So, all right, Chris, back to you. I will bring up the agenda again, just so you have that as well.
I don't think I need the agenda up.
Okay.
Next thing I wanted to bring in, reading through the mushroom good agricultural practices. I'm going to drop the USDA link in the chat right now. Um, and you know, I think the intent is to not overregulate and make these, you know, a requirement. But I also think, you know, we could use this as a recommendation for growers. And my intention is to kind of, in the next meeting on the 30th, to kind of get into the weeds on anything else that we need to with cultivation and kind of start the conversation around testing. And then, you know, we'll kind of keep working it that way, just popping down the line. So if you all know testing facilities that would like to come to that next meeting, please invite them. I'm going to try to get some people from Colorado to join the discussion, and I'll see if I can get Tori to come and give us an update on our the lessons learned from Oregon. I feel really bad that she wasn't able to speak today. I know she kind of rushed together to put something together for us, and that's kind of a bummer, but let's see if we can get her back to talk with us. So that's kind of my plan for now. Are there any questions about that or any thoughts about that plan? Is there a better standard? I know I've asked this before. Is there a better standard than the mushroom good agricultural practices that we should be using or looking at to kind of guide this? Okay.
We do have a comment in the chat there by James Sobe. Do we have a scheduled date for the next meeting?
Yeah, so the next meeting is going to be on the 30th at 3 o'clock, followed by the meeting after that will be on the 4th at 3 o'clock. And the last meeting I have scheduled is on the 11th at 3 o'clock. And I wanted to start doing some of these in person, but Department of Health has requested that I hold off and we do those virtually during the legislative session, but I still do want to get people face to face and having some of these discussions. So as soon as legislative sessions are over, I will get something scheduled so we can start meeting face to face. Greg, do you have a question?
I do. I'm going to take some time and read these practices that you sent. And I think we may need to redline some of these, but in general, I think that they're a good starting point. One thing that we may end up facing is the kind of a parity, a seed sale parity for that from cannabis. Like, are we going to be requiring that when we start a batch that it is tracked until the point of sale and use? Have we talked about that yet?
We have not yet talked about that tracking.
Yeah, I think
noted. You're very quiet. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that's going to be a big piece that we need to grab in the cultivation piece, right? Brett is asking if there's anything in particular we should be prepared to go over at the next meeting. I would say if you have a vested interest in that sunset clause, I would really like to get some language pinned down on that. That is one of the things that I want to propose. Like, first off, is this is for New Mexicans. How do we get it for New Mexicans? So if you could, if people want to draft language on that. The next one would be batch language. If you want to bring something to the table about what batches look like, how they need to be homogenized, what would make it fair for across the board, we can brainstorm on that and bring different ideas to the table. That would be great. But I think working off of that same document is probably prudent. We'll just kind of keep going with that. And nothing is finalized on there. So if you're looking it over and you say, hey, we want something different, bring it to the table. Let's keep working that language and making sure that we're getting what we want on that. Shane, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, so when you say for New Mexicans, you're talking about just those people that are going to be cultivating or practitioners. We're not talking about potential patients, right?
Yes, I think people can definitely come from out of state to get treatment here. I'm more talking about, the cultivators, the labs for testing. I would like to see the New Mexicans get a fair shake at that too. And any other process along the way that if we can keep our New Mexican residents employed through this program as much as possible, that would be my goal with that.
We have one comment in the chat by Brett Phelps. If we submit items to DOH via email, will those be distributed to the committee for review?
As far as I know, so we're still kind of working out the workflow, but yes, as far as I know, if you submit to the medical psilocybin at doh.nm.gov and make sure that the propagation committee is put in the subject line, that those will get forwarded to me. Is that correct, Dominic?
So here's the situation is it depends on what you're submitting. If you're trying to submit large documents, send us links, especially if it is something online, and then we will include that within the minutes or the meeting records, whether it's in this one or for the next meeting, depends on when it's submitted. But the biggest issue that we're really having is, remember, we have to do things transparently and here. So it can also be something where if you say, hey, I would like for this to be reviewed, we can bring it in and we can include it in the minute records for this meeting, as long as we get them by, and I do have a slide for that, as long as we get that by the end of day tomorrow, so that we can include it in. If it's after that, it can go into the next meeting records. But please don't send us, for example, we had in some of the other groups we had where we were getting hundreds of pages of documents that actually were things like the Oregon regulations, where what it really should be is it should be specific and saying, look at this section. And for example, in regulations, if it's another state, this section of the regulations. Otherwise, what ends up happening is everybody gets overwhelmed with just getting a ton of information, and it becomes very difficult for people to be able to parse through it, especially because these meetings are happening relatively quickly, and so when there's hundreds of pages, it can be very difficult, and then you find out it really was just one piece that somebody was trying to get across. So be very specific with what you're submitting. If it's to an already published document, send us the link. Send us where in that link somebody should go, like if it's on page 2, the 3rd paragraph, that kind of information, and then we'll include it in the records. We do have to do it this way so that, again, we're making sure that all of the information is available publicly to everybody. I hope that makes sense.
And also, I believe you can just bring it to this committee meeting and we can allow people to share things as they raise their hands. Is that correct, Dominic?
Yes, exactly.
So we can give you presenter authority and you can just pop it up on the screen, and then it'll be recorded as part of the record and we can all discuss it in council. So
just a quick one here we have from Gregory Evans. Regarding meeting schedule, are we targeting the 2nd of February meeting to have our official first draft for submission?
Yes, that'll be what we're targeting for our first group of proposals. And it doesn't need to be a finished product. The board is going to go and take them and they'll start picking it apart or looking at it. And I'm sure they'll have recommendations for us to go back and review and questions for us to answer and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, we want our first draft to go out on the 11th or after the meeting on the 11th.
And just to hype everyone up, we have Gregory Evans. Here we go.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Are there any other proposals that people would like to kind of throw out on the table for consideration before we close this up for the day? That way people can kind of sit on it for the next meeting. All right. Is there any other business that anybody wants to bring up then? So I just want to express a ton of gratitude for all of you that are coming and participating. This is, you know, all of our work collectively is going to make this program, you know, as good as we can get it. And so I'm just very grateful for all of you that are coming. And I will close this meeting up a little bit early if there's nothing else. And I'm looking forward to talking with you all next Friday on the 30th.
Thank you, everybody.
Gratitude.